Glossary of the Second Apocalypse. Section A. Ajencis. The classic treatise on Ajencis, written anonymously in near antiquity. Because of its emphasis on the relation between Ajencis and wisdom, many consider it a classical philosophical text as well. The Absolute. Among the Dunyain, the state of becoming unconditioned, a perfect self-moving soul independent of what comes before. Audunyani. Meaning Little Dunyain, this was the name taken by the followers assembled by Kelhus in Atrathau. Ave Eternal Seal. A great ornamental plaque, unique to every non-man mansion, typically set behind the king's throne, widely thought to be the most sacred of their relics. According to the Holy Druil, the primary scripture of the non-men, Immemorul, who had hacked off his shield arm to create the non-men, took Sheol, the house primordial, as his shield against the starving sky. As a symbolic shield of Immorul, each seal was thought to be invested, if not imbued, with the essence of its respective mansion. Crack the shield, an old proverb went, sunder the mountain. Agerzoi. Meaning cut tongue in Irimsu, Agerzoi is the language of the Shrank. It was long disputed amongst the Kunaroi whether the Shrank could be said to possess any language at all, given their lack of souls. Among those who had long, hard experience of the Shrank, their possession of language was a murderous fact. But Kuya sages, such as the venerated Yardicus, asked how Shrank words could mean, given their lack of experience altogether. What could a language without meaning possibly be? The answer, that eventually became dogma, was that the Shrank tongue was a form of dark speech, which, although nowhere allowing reflection or choice of words, served the bestial requirements of the Shrank quite fine. Damiel Isharin, a Sheolin Ishroi, who found himself trapped for 5 days hidden in a dead fall in the heart of an itinerant clan camp, famously claimed the Shrank possessed social customs and regimes nearly very as complicated as their own. Based on his account, several scholars, such as the famously heretical Ludijata, went so far as to argue that all language was dark, and that meaning was the province of the sorcerer and the gods alone. However, few lent credence to such extreme views. Agongaria. Meaning the fields of woe in Kuniuric, the famed field appalling in the days of the ancient north, the blasted lands to the west of the river Sursa and north of the Neliost Sea. Given extant non-man accounts of Arkfall, most Three Seas scholars believe, as indeed their far antique counterparts believed, that Agongaria was an unnatural consequence of the debris thrown up by the impact of the Inku Haloinus. Agonic Collar. A sorcerous artifact of the ancient north, reputedly crafted by the Mitrulic Gnostic school. According to Mandate scholars, the purpose of the Agonic Collar was analogous to that of the Orborian Circle utilized by the anagogic schools of the Three Seas, namely, to inflict excruciating pain on the wearer should he attempt to utter any sorcerous incantation. Ajencis. The father of syllogistic logic and algebra, held by many to be the greatest of all philosophers. Born in the Kyranian capital of Metzonk, he is reputed to have never once left his city, even during the horrific plagues of 1991, when his advanced age made his death a near certainty. According to various sources, Ajencis bathed on a daily basis and refused to drink water drawn from city wells, claiming that these practices, combined with a distaste for drunkenness and a moderate diet, were the keys to his health. Many commentators, both antique and contemporary, complain that there are as many Ajencises as there are readers of Ajencis. Though this is certainly true of his more speculative works, such as Theophysics or the First Analytic of Men, his work does possess a discernible and consistent skeptical core, primarily exemplified in the Third Analytic of Men, which also happens to be his most cynical work. For Ajencis, men by and large make their weaknesses, not reason or the world, the primary measure of what they hold true. In fact, he observed that most individuals possessed no criteria whatsoever for their beliefs. As a so-called critical philosopher, one might have supposed he would eventually share the same fate as other critical philosophers, such as Porsa, the famed philosopher whore of Trice, or Kumharet. Only his reputation, and the structure of Kyranian society, saved him from the vicissitudes of the mob. As a child, he was allegedly such a prodigy that the High King himself took notice of him, granting him what was called protection at the unprecedented age of 8. Protection was an ancient and hallowed Kyranian institution. The protected were those who could say anything without fear of reprisal, even to the High King. Ajencis continued speaking until he suffered a stroke and died at the venerable age of 103. Ajencis, the god of thievery and deception, also known as the Four-Horned Brother, though listed among the primary gods in the Chronicle of the Tusk. There is no true cult of Ajencis, but rather an informal network of devotees scattered across the great cities of the Three Seas. The lack of any organizing institutions has transformed the cult into the skulking criminal embodiment of its skulking criminal master. The high priests of the cult, insofar as it possesses any, are its Narendar, the most deadly of the most deadly assassins. Ajencis is oft mentioned in the secondary scriptures of the different cults, sometimes as a mischievous companion of the gods, other times as a cruel or malicious competitor. In the Mar Edat, he is the faithless husband of Giera. In the Book of Gods, he is nothing less than the dread enemy of mankind, the one god too hungry to remain in the outside. In the Book of Hinerates, he is the same, but depleted for his endless grasping, and so reduced to craft and insinuation. The fractured image presented in the scriptures is expressed in the sheer number of names used to reference him or his work. The trickster, the thief, the four-horned brother, the bald-faced, the grinning god, immortal malice, the prince of hate, the rake, among others. Ajencis, the god of disease, also known as the god of 1,000 hands. Scholars have oft noted the irony that the priesthood of disease provides the primary repository for the physicians of the Three Seas. How can one at once worship disease and war against it? According to the scriptures of the cult, the Piranavas, Ajencis is a so-called bellicose god, one who favors those who strive against him over sycophants and worshippers. Axercia, a lost nation of the ancient north. Though the white Norsari of the north shore of the Serish Sea lacked any sustained contact with the non-men, they gradually became the second great seat of Norsari civilization. Axercia was founded in 811 by Saloern I, following the dissolution of the Khand yoke. Though originally confined to the city of Myclay, her commercial and administrative capital, the nation gradually extended its hegemony, first along the length of the river Taiwanrei, then across the plains of Gal, and the entire north shore of the Serish Sea. By the time of the First Great Shrank War, in 1251, it was the largest of the ancient Norsari nations, incorporating almost all of the white Norsari tribes, save those of the Astuli Plains. It was Axercian colonists on the Serish Sea's heavily forested south shore who would form the nucleus of what would become the Maorn Empire. Axercia fell to the No-God after 3 disastrous defeats in 2149. Alamir, the legendary ensorcelled sword of the Kuniork High Kings, famed for possessing the edge peerless, and when wielded with skill, capable of halving mammoths. Lost at the Battle of Elinot with an Ossirimber Kelmomus in 2146. Amiolis, sorceress face-encasing helm allowing the wearer to understand Irimsu, widely regarded as one of the most powerful Emilidic artifacts. Despite the miracles of sorcery, translation had, and has, remained stubbornly impervious to arcane facilitation. The genius of Emilides was primarily metaphysical. He grasped the continuity of meaning in souls, how a sorceress understanding of Irimsu entailed a sorceress unification of disparate souls. Inventing new forms of sorcery as he proceeded, Emilides imbued his helm with the soul of Imericus Kinalrig, the infamous malcontent, an Injori Ishroy condemned to die by Kujarakimwa, and given the choice by Nilgikus between risking the hells or dwelling forever as an amputated interpreting soul. The Aeolus surfaces in human histories at several junctures, including protracted periods where kings and grand masters refused to wear what the Umeri called the embalming skull, and the Kunyori the cauldron, fearing it to be a weapon, which it almost certainly became on occasion. According to Sohonk scholars, the Aeolus melted the contents of Imericus into the warmer waters of the wearer's souls, creating a composite, a morass that would dry out for some, deepen for others. Irimsu would come effortlessly, only twisted in every respect about the hard fiber of the malcontent, the architecture of his ancient old soul. Though no records exist of wearers admitting to what had been a profound transformation of identity, Mandate scholars report that Seswatha forever regretted demanding it from Nilgikus, even though the information it provided allowed him and Now Coyote to steal the hair and spear, and so save the world. Amotu, a government of Kian, located on the southern edge of the Menanor Sea. Like all the nations in the shadow of the Betmula Mountains, Amotu, or Holy Amotu, as it is sometimes called, grew in the influential shadow of old dynasty Shaigek. According to the extant inscriptions, the Shaigeki referred to both Zerash and Amotu as Hut Jartha, the land of Jarti, or as Huti Perota, the Middle Lands. The Jarti were the dominant Ketai tribe of the region, to which the Amoti and several others were tributaries before the Shaigeki conquest. But with the extensive cultivation of the Sherazor plains, and the slow rise of Shaima and Kudea along the river Jemishal, the balance of power slowly shifted. For centuries the Middle Lands found themselves the battleground between Shaigek and her southern competitors, Umarna across the Butmula Mountains, and ancient or Vepartic Nilnemesh. In 1322, Anzu Marapata II, the Nilnemeshi king of Invishi, crushed the Shaigeki and, in an effort to secure his conquests, transplanted hundreds of thousands of indigent Nilnemeshi on the plains of Heshor, an act that would long outlive his brief empire. The Shaigeki reconquered the Middle Lands in 1349. With the collapse of the Shaigeki regional dominance in 1591, the Jarti attempted to reassert their ancestral control, with disastrous consequences. The resulting war gave rise to a brief Omoti Empire, which reached the length of the Butmula to the frontier of the Karathay Desert. All the Middle Lands would fall under the power of Kyranius in 1703. With the dissolution of Kyranius, circa 2158, Amotu enjoyed its second, and last, period of independence. Though now the Zerashi, the descendants of Anzu Marapata's settlers, had become its primary competitors. This second Golden Age would witness Inri Sejanus, the slow growth of the faith that would eventually come to dominate the Three Seas. After a brief period of Zerashi occupation, Amotu would suffer a long succession of foreign overlords, each leaving its own stamp. First the Canayans, who conquered the Middle Lands in 2414, and then the Nansur in 3574, and finally the Kianin in 3845. Despite the peace and prosperity enjoyed by other conquered provinces, the early years of Canaan rule would prove particularly bloody for the Amotu. In 2458, when Triamus the Great was still in his infancy, Inrithi fanatics led the province in a vicious rebellion against Cannae. As punishment, Emperor Cyaxus II butchered the inhabitants of Kudea and razed the city to the ground. Ainake, the goddess of fortune, also known as the Whore of Fate. Ainake is one of the primary compensatory gods, which is to say, one who rewards devotion in life with paradise in the afterlife. Her cult is extremely popular in the Three Seas, especially among the higher political castes. Anagosis, a branch of sorcery that turns on the resonances between meanings and concrete things. In Kellian metaphysics, there is the meaning that is being, the meaning that is your angle upon the world, and then there is the meaning that inflicts being, merely. This latter we know as everyday writing and speech, whereas the former is the province of sorcery and religion. To be a soul is to be at once an angle on the world, and to be the world, but one small angle that existence possesses on existence, on itself. The so-called many, given their blindness to being, cannot close the circuit of thought and being. The few can see the onta, however, and so can, given the proper rigor and training, close the circuit of thought and being, work what appear to be miracles. As it turns out, there are two quite different ways of deriving being from thought. One analogical, as with the anagosis and the iswazi, and one inferential, as with the gnosis and metanosis. So where the gnosis deals directly with abstract forces, the anagosis deals with the substance embodying these forces. Anagosis is, once again deferring to Kellian metaphysical parlance, a phenomenological sorcerous art, relying on the densities of experiential meaning as described to derive manifestations. The gnosis, by contrast, is a formal sorcerous art. Both rely on the same intellectual gymnastics, essentially speaking and thinking different yet intricately interrelated things simultaneously, but they draw their semantic force from very different sources, much as poetry and mathematics do. Throughout history, the Scarlet Spires have consistently been the most innovative of the anagogic schools, which is why a good fraction of the anagogic canon is derived from their research. Cants such as the infamous Dragonhead or Hulari Twin Tempests. Anaxophis V, the Kyranian High King who wielded the hair and spear against the No-God at Mengeda in 2155. Ancestor Scroll, a scroll kept by most pious Inrithi, bearing the names of all the dead ancestors who might intercede on their behalf. Since the Inrithi believe that honor and glory in life bring power in the afterlife, they are particularly proud of renowned ancestors and ashamed of known sinners. Angeshriel, the most famed old prophet of the Tusk, responsible for leading the 5 tribes of men into Erwa, also known as the Burnt Prophet, for bowing his face into the fire after confronting Husielt on the foot of Mount Eshki. His wife was Esmenet. Animus, the moving force of all existence, typically analogized as the breath of God. Much ink has been spilt over the question of the relation between animus, which is primarily a theological concept, and the sorcerer's concept of onta. Most scholars are of the opinion that the latter is simply a secular version of the former. Anand, a province of north-central Konraya, known primarily for its silver and iron mines. All the silver in Anand is a common 3C's expression meaning pricelessness. Ajencis, the administrative and commercial capital of Konraya. Once the capital of the long-lost Shirati Empire, Ajencis is perhaps the most ancient of the 3C's great cities, with the possible exception of Sumna or Iothea. Eorsi, a lost nation of the ancient north. Eorsi was founded in the 1556 partitioning of the Greater Kuniori between the sons of Inasarimber Nanor Ukchera I at his death. Even contemporaries recognized Eorsi as the most warlike of the ancient Norserai nations, though her ambitions remained uniquely defensive rather than expansionist. Sparsely populated, save for the regions surrounding her capital, Shirao, Eorsi faced considerable and unrelenting pressure from the Shrank and Bashrag tribes of the Imaleti Mountains to the north. Not to mention the consort legions of Golgotarath across the river Sursa to the west. A challenge that would spur the construction of Dagliash, the greatest fortress of the age. It is no accident that the word Sursa came to mean front line across the ancient north. Eorsi's history is one of ingenuity and determination in the face of never-ending crises. Perhaps it is fitting that her destruction in 2136 was due more to the betrayal of her southern Kuniuric cousins than to any real failure on the part of Inasarimber Nymeric, her final king. Apocalypse. System initiation. The protracted wars and atrocities that obliterated the ancient north. The roots of the apocalypse are many and deep. Mandate scholars, who popular opinion to the contrary are not the recognized authorities on the subject, argue that they are older than recorded history. More sober accounts reach back... sorry guys, this entry is like 1,400 words long, and I just did 25 minutes on the first apocalypse. You can watch it here. Asgiliok. Kyranian for the Gate of Azka, the great Nansur fortress, dating back to far antiquity, guarding the so-called southern gates in the Unaris Spur. Perhaps no 3C's fortress can claim such a storied past. which includes, most recently, stopping no fewer than 3 Phanim invasions. Over the years, the Nansar have coined many epithets for the famed stronghold, among them Hubara, or the Breakers. Aspect Emperor, the title taken by Triamus the Great in the 23rd year of his rule, when the Shrya, Echianus III, formally institutionalized the so-called emperor cult, and adopted by all his successors. The title was also taken by Anasarimberkelis I, following the capitulation of Shaima to the First Holy War. The Atchondrus Mountains, perhaps the greatest range of the Chaarsis, running from the Sea of Jerua to the Great Ocean, and effectively sealing Zeum from the rest of Erwa. Atrethau, the ancient administrative and commercial capital of what was once Emnor, and one of the 2 Norserai cities to have survived the apocalypse. Atrethau is peculiar in that it is built upon what is called an arcane ground, which is to say ground that renders sorcery impotent, found at the foot of Mount Ankulakai. It was originally founded circa 570 as the fortress Ara Etrith by the famed Umeri god king Karu Oganian. Atrempis, the Tower of Respite in Kyranian, the sister fortress of Ajencis, founded in 2158 by Seswatha and the nascent school of Mandate, and held in trust by House Nursei of Conraya since 3921. Ajencis, meaning Tower of Warning in Kyranian, the sister fortress to Atrempis, founded in 2157 by Seswatha and the other Gnostic survivors of the apocalypse. Ajencis is the primary stronghold of the Mandate. Alianau the Conqueror, legendary ruler of the Khand who defeated Kel Oganian at the Battle of River Axau, leading to the breaking of Umarau and the beginning of the Khand yoke. His subsequent campaigns would unite the Norserai for the first time since Uskelt Wolfheart. Since references to Aluniau typically signaled pan-Norserai sympathies among the Middle North caste nobles, particularly the Tidoni, Anasarimberkelis declared an excision in 4128, striking all record of his name and famously executing several notables who continued to pretend that such a personage had ever existed. Almris River, the primary river system in northwest Erwa, draining the greater Istuli Basin and emptying into the Neliost Sea. The river Almris is also called the cradle of Norserai civilization. Over a relatively brief period of time, the High Norserai tribes that settled the rich alluvial plains along the lower Almris founded the first cities of men, including Trisay, Soglish, Etrith, and Umarau. As the result of trade with the non-men of Injornius, the power and sophistication of the Almris River civilization grew quickly, culminating in the Tricean Empire under the god king Kunwershau in the 4th century. Orang, Kunioric for the Warlord, a surviving prince of the Inkoroi and horde general to the No-God during the apocalypse. Very little is known of Orang, save that he is a high-ranking member of the Consult and the twin brother of Orax. Horde General Sinferion, Deceiving Angel, and Sarpaner represent some of the more significant names he has earned over the ages. Orax, a surviving prince of the Inkoroi. Very little is known of Orax, save that he is a ranking member of the Consult and the twin brother of Orang. Mandate scholars speculate that it was he who first taught the Techne to the Mangekka. Avengshi, famed Canaan fortress on the extreme western frontier of Nilnemesh, often symbolically invoked as the limit of the known world, which is to say, the 3 seas. Successively occupied and abandoned over the years, it would be rebuilt by Anasarimberkelis in 4123, following the Zaudanyoni conquest of Nilnemesh. Evalunsil, the legendary far-antique Umeri princess who murdered Saimol, the Sketic chieftain who had executed her father, Wutel Ogonrian, with a fish knife, so giving birth to the family of bardic lays called the Harsunsi, or fish knives. She would go on to be the first, and only, empress of the Umeri Empire. According to the various tales in the cycle, she was called the Twice-Flowered for her refusal to marry, and was ultimately assassinated by one of her suitors. Avowals. The classic text by Olekaros, which poses a spiritual exploration, but is in actual fact little more than a collection of wise sayings from various thinkers in various nations. Its Shayak translation enjoys widespread popularity among caste noble lay readers in the Three Seas.